Hello everyone, this is Ashley Tucker from My Favorite Things. Today I have a different kind of interactive card to share with you. Using these cute little bear stamps, I'm going to actually make them swing. These bears are from the new stamp set called I'm So In Love With You Still, and as soon as I saw them on these little swings hanging off of these clouds, I thought that it would be really cool if I could figure out a way to make them actually swing. And the way that I came up with to make them swing is actually fairly simple, and it came together pretty quickly. First things first though, I had to stamp them and color them in. I used Waymisty to stamp them with a Copic friendly black ink, and now I'm coloring them in with my Copic markers. The kind of paper that I used is the Neenah Classic Crest Solar White cardstock in 110 pound. You could also use the 80 pound if you prefer a lighter cardstock. I actually like the heavier cardstock, and I mostly use that. Every now and then, if I need my cards to have a little less bulk, I'll use the 80 pound. Now for the first bear, I pulled some colors that I would typically use for a bear, but for the second one, I pulled some colors that I wouldn't typically think to use. I used that ash rose color, and I really like the way that turned out. I really like the kind of pinkish tone that she has, and I like that I tried something that I wouldn't typically do on this bear. When I grabbed the color, I wasn't so sure about it. I was like, this isn't going to work. It's going to look kind of weird, but I thought I'd give it a shot and see because I wanted to try something different. And I'm glad that I did because I think that she looks so cute. That's why it's always good to try things and see how they work out because you might be surprised with the results. All right, so I finished up the coloring on those and I cut them out the coordinating dies, and then I pulled out the Never Ending Love background stamp. I made sure to remove the foam pad from the Misty so that my background stamp has enough room for stamping, and then I stamped it with Spun Sugar Distress Oxide ink onto a square of Neenah Solar White. Next, I grabbed that same color of Distress Oxide ink and one of my blender brushes, and I'm going to blend that color around the edge of this square of cardstock. I pulled out a sentiment from the Odd Couples stamp set, and I'm going to stamp that right in the center of this square using VersaFine Onyx Black ink. That is a pigment ink, so you want to make sure that it fully dries before you touch it so that you don't smudge it. And then I cut this panel down to 4 3/4 by 4 3/4, and I used my tape runner to adhere it onto a pink panel of cardstock, which is cut to 5 by 5. So for the interactive part of this card, I first laid out these two images with the swings on them, exactly where I want them to be on the card, and then I made a mark in the center behind the clouds with a pencil. Next, you want to take a piece of string and adhere it to the back of the cloud. I'm using a piece of really strong tape to hold down that string, and then I'm actually going to fold the end of the string over the top of that tape and tape it down a second time to make sure that it's really, really adhered and not going anywhere. The string that I'm using is a clear jewelry twine, but you could also use regular thread. I'm going to do the same exact thing on the other image so that I have strings attached to the back of both of the clouds. Next, I grabbed my craft pick and I very carefully poked a hole in those two pencil marks that I made earlier. If you don't have a craft pick, you could also use a large needle for this. You just want to be careful to not have your fingers behind the paper where you're poking through because you don't want to hurt yourself. Next, I just threaded the string through that hole and pulled it all the way so that the cloud is covering up the hole. And I'm going to turn it over and tape it to the back, making sure to leave just a tiny bit of slack so that it can move around pretty freely. You don't want to leave too much slack here because you don't want it to slip down and not cover up that hole, but you do want it to be able to swing around pretty easily. I just used regular Scotch tape to tape down this string, and again I'm going to fold the end of the string back over the top of the tape and tape it a second time just to make sure that it's really secure. And then I did exactly the same thing on the other side with the other bear, threading that string through the hole and pulling it, and then taping it 2 times onto the back. Next, I added some foam tape all the way around the edge of the back of this panel, and then I popped it up onto a 5.5 by 5.5 white card base. Now, I was liking the way that this card was turning out, but I decided it needed a little bit of bling, and by a little bit of bling, I mean a lot of bling, because I went a little bit crazy with all of the sequins and embellishments on this. I glued all of these down with liquid adhesive. I do want to mention that I have a tiny little heart sequin there in between the two bears, and later on you might notice that I change out that sequin for a heart embellishment. I was finding that the bear was catching underneath the heart sequin and getting stuck, so I decided to change it out with the heart embellishment so that it wouldn't get stuck. I used my glitter brush on the clouds to make them sparkly, and I added a couple of highlights to the bears, and then this card is all done. Now, because we have some free moving elements on this card, you do want to make sure that all of the glue dries properly before you start playing with the bears. You don't want to get any glue underneath those bears and have them stick. But here you can see how they swing around. It's a really cute interactive card. It'd be fun to give to anyone for Valentine's Day. You could also change up the colors and the sentiment on the card and make a cute friendship card. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope you enjoyed this card design and that it gave you some ideas, and I'll see you next time.